Hello. This is Tim Salmons, and today we're going to do something a little different. Teresa's not here, Chris is not here, not anyone is here, really. I'm by myself today, as you can tell. Today, consider this like a side podcast, Salmonella solo, if you will. I just figure, we haven't had time to really sit down. Well, I mean, there's a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons is we haven't really had time to sit down and record a podcast together. Also, we haven't really had a whole lot to talk about between the three of us, which that might change pretty soon. In lieu of that, I thought I'd sit down and record a solo stream about various things that I'm on about, that you might be interested in. So, I don't know. We'll see where this goes. Let's talk about some stuff that I've seen lately. I've been hip deep in doing reviews for the Digital Bits. By the way, if you don't read the Digital Bits, you really should. It's a long-running website that specializes in analyzing home media, which, started with Laserdisc and DVD and now Blu-ray and now 4K Blu-ray, which is apparently going to be a thing. I don't know how successful it's going to be because there's already naysayers. I guess that it's a strange thing because you never really know what's going to take off and what isn't. 4K Blu-ray looks like something that could possibly have potential. But the thing is, I think a lot of people, and I'm not talking about just people who collect DVDs and Blu-rays and things like that. I think they just got used to the idea of high definition, like regular high definition. And I don't know if 4K is going to catch on as fast. I really don't know. Or if at all. It's really iffy. And also, it doesn't help that there's an upgrade sort of thing. It's the same with a DVD, I'm sure you're familiar with, is that when Blu-ray came along, they were trying to sell the idea that this is much better quality and that if you have old DVDs and you want to keep those, there are certain players that actually can make the DVDs look better, can upgrade the quality, even though technically it's not better quality, which is true. I mean, it did to some degree, but Blu-ray is obviously better. There was a caveat with that, however. Certain companies, I won't name names because, read my reviews. Or read any reviews over the Digital Bits, and you'll know who I'm talking about. Certain companies certain companies feel the need to make things look perfect on DVD, or not DVD, but Blu-ray rather. And not everything is perfect looking. And this is something that I think a lot of people who collect Blu-rays and DVDs and things like that don't really seem to understand. Is that not everything can look as pristine and perfect as it can be. Some things were shot on really low budgets with not the best lighting, with not the best equipment available, and ultimately not the best care was taken of some things, especially the really obscure stuff. And even to some degree, some of the high profile, mainstream, quote unquote, titles. So not everything is always going to look like $1 million. Now, for me personally, I love watching a presentation that's very pure, where you can see the film grain embedded into the image and it's not been wiped clean, because that's a real ball buster if you're a cinephile, is that you're watching this beautiful, pristine presentation, but it comes at a cost. They've completely wiped it clean with digital tools and cleaned all of the grain out of the image. And and not only does it clean up the grain from the image, it actually erases information from the image. So in essence, you're looking at a very glossy looking picture. Now that's not something that's that common anymore. I think there's maybe one or two companies that still put out material with that kind of presentation. But for the most part, I believe that some of these distribution companies are listening to their fans and taking these things into consideration before they transfer something to Blu-ray. And it's also an amazing time to be a home media enthusiast, whether you agree with me or not. There is some really crazy things going on. You think about the heyday of DVD when anything and everything was getting a special edition box set release. I remember Anchor Bay, they didn't always have the best presentations, but they really they'd really give you some extra material, audio commentaries and stuff like that. And they would put them in these nice tin cases with maybe a soundtrack, or you get some swag like a poster, some lobby cards, something along those lines. And to some degree, that is now returned with some of these smaller distribution companies. The way it works is this: there have always been the big major companies, 20th Century Fox, Universal, MGM, several others, and Paramount. And they've been reluctant to release a lot of things on Blu-ray for a multitude of reasons, mainly because they believe the market just isn't there. And it's an argument that you can approach very diligently if you're a fan in any capacity, because the constant argument is that physical media is nearly done with, as far as Blu-rays and DVDs and things like that. Now 4K Blu-ray, and it's not. If anything, it's a niche, and that's a good thing though, because if you go out and buy a major release, like I use the example of Creed. Creed is a terrific movie. But the Blu-ray release, although it featured a really gorgeous A+, almost perfect Blu-ray transfer, I think it would look even more stupendous in 4K Blu-ray. The extras on that release were they were very lax. You did get to see some deleted scenes, but the EPK material was very lackluster. It was more geared towards promoting the movie more than actually delving into the actual making of and getting into the nitty gritty of how it was made and the ideas and everything. So you get stuff like that for major releases. Then you got people like Arrow Video from the UK, who have now recently started releasing stuff in the US. Scream Factory, Vinegar Syndrome, Synapse Films, all these small companies who are now releasing a lot of these companies' big catalog, or not big catalog, actually they're deep catalog releases, stuff that they don't feel that they can make a profit from. There are studios like MGM and Universal and 20th Century Fox, 20th Century Fox and MGM are actually, as far as catalog titles, are kind of tied in together because 20th Century Fox owns a lot of MGM's catalog. They've relented and started licensing these titles out to these companies. And because of that, you have companies like Scream Factory and Vinegar Syndrome who now get these and they put out these lavish releases with just crazy amount of extras and all kinds of even the stuff that doesn't have like tons of extras. I always use Without Warning, a movie that never had like a proper VHS release, a DVD or proper DVD release, or a Blu-ray, and all of a sudden it comes to Blu-ray and it's not the greatest movie ever made, but it exists. It's something that, you wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and just the fact that it's there, because I'm sure the movie has its fans, and that's great. The people that love that movie or even like the movie, it's great for them because they get something that they wouldn't have otherwise got. And the only way they would have seen it is through like a shitty bootleg that was really blocky and really dark and murky and just practically unwatchable. But the only way to see it anyways. So to have a pristine Blu-ray presentation of a movie like that, it's great. And Arrow Video is cleaning up in the UK right now. They put out a couple of early 80s slashers called The Mutilator and Blood Rage. And I love those movies. I'm a big fan of these, these slashers. I've never heard of these movies before. And I don't think a lot of people had. Even like hardcore horror fans had never heard of these movies. And, and even as, whether you call yourself a cinephile or a horror fan, these movies are just not well known at all. And also, Arrow Video put out this box set that, and I've done reviews for all these movies, so I know them a little bit more than perhaps some other releases. But Arrow Video put out this box set that had 3 very obscure horror movies. One was not really a horror movie, but it sort of was. One was more of a thriller. Malatesta's Carnival of Blood, The Witch Who Came from the Sea, and The Premonition. These 3 movies they put out in this box set called the American Horror Project. Volume 1, denoting that there would be a Volume 2, hopefully. And I hope there is, because this is the kind of stuff that I love. This is the obscure stuff, the stuff I've never heard of. It's like, I don't know, it's like digging up buried treasure. And, you look at it. Or going on a hunt for, like a paleontologist or something, digging up a skeleton of a dinosaur. This is just the kind of stuff that I really dig. I dig mainstream releases. I'm not saying I don't, but this is the stuff that really interests me. The stuff I've never heard of. Like especially stuff like Malatesta's Carnival of Blood, which is a weird fucking movie. But it's something that you don't get to see too often anymore. You don't get to really discover things anymore because a lot of, especially now, because of the advent of internet and everybody knows everything about everything, it seems, you don't really get to discover anything hardly anymore. So when something like Blood Rage, Malatesta's Carnival of Blood, or The Mutilator, also known as Fall Break, comes along, I personally relish stuff like this. This is the kind of stuff that I dig. But getting back to my point, these companies, have relinquished a lot of their back catalog and given it out to other people, other companies to release. And you get these really extravagant releases. And you look at that and you see the numbers and you think, I'm not saying that all of the releases for these companies are doing remarkable business. I would say that probably Arrow Video probably does more business than some of the other ones. But that's just a guess. They also put a lot more money into their releases, I think, and a lot more, there's just obviously a lot more care put into them because of the way they're presented. They're presented in these really elaborate releases with slipcases and booklets, insert booklets with information about the movie. Stuff that, I love Scream Factory, but they don't always do stuff like that with some of their titles. But again, it's a budget thing. It's not really their fault. It's what do they have the budget for, and versus what do they think will sell. So it's a process that it's a process. It's just, when all is said and done, it's a process. It's not really, we want to put out everything in the grandest edition that there is. It's not really like that, because I think in the UK, Arrow Video really is like a major, almost a studio to some point, major company. They're a brand name. And they could afford to put out some of these things in these really grand editions, even though stuff like you've never heard of before. A Scream Factory is not really like that. Of course, Scream Factory is an off kind of a sidebar to Shout Factory, a side company. It's the same company run by the same people, but it's more of a brand name. And that brand name has gotten really popular, but it's not to the degree that, your mother might know who it is, or your grandmother might know who it is, or something like that. And I'm not saying that Arrow Video is like that in the UK, but it's just it's different. But they don't always have the best budgets for some of their releases. They do what they can, and they do a lot. And I'm not saying that they put out crap for their releases. They do the best that they can. And there's an upcoming Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 Blu-ray that's coming out, which has already been out on Arrow Video in the UK. And I thought, could they possibly match that? Because that Blu-ray was excellent. It was loaded with extras and an insert booklet and like early films from Tobe Hooper and stuff. And I'm like, there's no way that they're going to match this. I think they surpassed it personally. Even though it's not going to come with an insert booklet, it's coming with more material related to that movie itself, as opposed to the Arrow Video release, which, it had those early films with Tobe Hooper, but they didn't really relate much to the movie. So, it just depends on a lot of different factors. So you can be a small company and squeeze out some of these. I think Synapse Films is doing some remarkable work. They spend years on like one title. They don't release titles that often. And they'll spend years painstakingly going over a title, a transfer, or, and extras and everything before they release it. And some of these companies like Scream Factory, they don't spend that much time on it. And, their stuff is really great, but as far as the quality, you can tell. You can tell. Both great companies, but different. They approach things differently. Which is great because, it gives the buyer some choice. There's a section of people on the internet that really hate certain companies. Like, some people maybe hate's a strong word, but dislike the practices of some companies. Scream Factory is one of them, because a lot of them say that their releases feature transfers that are not as up to snuff as they could be. And personally, I feel it's nitpicky and whiny. It gets to that point where it's one thing to say, oh, obviously some of the this doesn't look as good as maybe a previous release or something along those lines, but to the point of saying, well, this is crap because this company put it out. That's just fucking stupid and not very helpful. And it's not good feedback. And I imagine that they ignore comments like that because they're not really worth addressing because it's just a nitpicky, whiny shit that's saying it. Who wants everything to be perfect, and even if it is perfect, he might not go out and buy it, on release, which is another problem. A lot of controversy right now surrounding Star Trek's 50th anniversary, which Bill Hunt addressed on the Digital Bits. He was in contact with Paramount, and the Paramount executives and the people in the distribution department asked his opinions, being that he's an Uber Trek fan, and they've often come to him with questions. What do Star Trek fans really want for their home video releases of the Trek movies? He gave his opinions, and they ignored most of them. And it's upset a lot of fans, but at the same time, that Paramount has to be looking at these responses. There is like a 100 plus comment thread on Facebook, with this news, and almost every response is a negative one. And not all of them are, and it's not nitpicky and whiny. It's simply saying that, we've bought these several times before. We haven't gotten what we want so far. This is what we want, and we're not getting it still. And then it goes back to that argument about, what can you afford versus what sell. And if people don't buy these things like right away, and the companies don't make money on them, there's no drive for them to put them out. And at the end of the day, it's a business. It's not something that's personal, completely personal for them. I'm sure there's lots of people that work for these companies that are invested in the movies and they love these movies and they want to put them out. But if people aren't buying them, then they can't make money and they can't keep putting more out. It's a problem. And so when I see these nitpicky, whiny bitches, I don't particularly care for them. And I try to ignore them for the most part. So that's all. I think the bottom line here is I think people need to appreciate what these companies are doing more than they do. And I don't think that they do. I think they take them for granted, especially if you look at the comments, especially on Scream Factory's page when they announce a new title. They'll announce something and immediately one of the first comments will be, well, when's this coming out? You said something about this. When's this coming out? And it's like, you don't get it. They just made a major announcement about a title. And they're very excited about it. They put out, and all people can do is go like, I don't care about that. What about this? I want this instead. This is what I want. And I'm like, you don't really know what you want. You just want everything. And I think that's part of the equation too, is some of these collectors, so-called collectors, they just want everything. And they want it in the best quality possible. And sometimes that's just not fucking possible. And today, in the market and everything, it's not possible to get everything. Rights issues and sales and budgets and everything. You got to, all these things you've got to take into account, and you've got to keep in mind that these companies will go aggressively for the best things that they could possibly get. And if they don't get everything, it's not for lack of trying, I think is the bottom line. These companies, like Scream Factory, they really care, but they can't get everything. So get off their fucking backs, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's that. Moving on. What else have I got to talk about? I've got some notes here. I'll just take a look here. Teresa and I, she's not here to talk about it, but our opinions were very similar. We went to see Zootopia. We both agreed that, wow, that when we saw the trailers and stuff, obviously the trailer that everyone saw, but I saw Star Wars 7 times, so I saw the same trailer, which showed the sloth scene. It was really, really funny. I really liked it. And I started reading about the movie, and I thought, this sounds like something that's different. This doesn't sound like a typical Disney or Pixar, even though it's not a Pixar movie. It sounds different. It sounds like, it just sounded different. So we kind of bookmarked it and said, well, we'll go see that. I was going to go see The Witch, and I decided not to because the reviews for it were kind of mixed, and it kind of put me off of seeing the movie, unfortunately. I wanted to go out and see it and support it, but I don't know, just something in me was telling me, don't go see this, go see something else. So unfortunately, that's what happened. Sorry for that. I'll see it when it comes out on video, definitely. But we went to see Zootopia, and it turned out to be incredibly generic. And I felt betrayed in a way, not to the point where, oh, you've broken my heart. Not particularly that way, but more just, it looked better than most of the movies like it. It came off as a DreamWorks picture, and I particularly don't care for a lot of DreamWorks Animation's output because a lot of it is very lowbrow, generic, reach the widest audience possible stuff, with fart jokes and lowbrow humor, references, outside references that take you completely out of the moment and the movie and the story, and just uber kid-friendly stuff. And, it just, to me, a lot of it is just, by the way, it makes references, like modern day references, and immediately dates itself once it does that. And that really bugs me. So I don't particularly care for DreamWorks stuff. And this Zootopia came off like it was a DreamWorks movie. It was doing those things. It was making outside references. It had really goofy characters and it had a really lowbrow humor. At times, it would have little bits of stuff that was really funny. But it wasn't enough. Of course, the best scene in the movie is the sloth scene, and I knew that already because I'd already seen it in the trailer. They played pretty much the entire scene, minus a few edits, and I couldn't believe how generic it was. And and it's also like a very, I want to say girl power, which I'm all for because Star Wars was amazing, and so was Fury Road, and men are upset about ladies being in their action movies and stuff. I'm like, fuck all of you. These women are great, and it doesn't matter that they're women; they're just great. But the story is about a female bunny who wants to be a cop, even though everyone's telling her not to do it, that she can't do it. So she does it, and she learns some things along the way about herself and about other people, and she gets to go work in Zootopia, which is sort of like maybe New York City or Los Angeles or something like that, like a big melting pot full of people, and she wants to make a difference and things like that and stuff. And that idea, I'm fine with that. That sounds fine. But the way it's executed and the way that the story lays itself out, and it feels very generic. And by the way, when the movie's half over, it feels over. Like it feels like the story's done, and then it continues, and that's bad news because it doesn't feel like a good pace. Like you feel like, oh, I've got to watch more. Because when it's half over, you feel like, oh, that's it. I'm trying not to spoil the movie, by the way. I'm just saying that it's at some point the story feels like it's done, and then it continues, and it didn't really work. It felt lopsided, I guess, and also because of some of the poor choices at comedy and outside references. At one point she's walking down, or she goes to see somebody who's supposed to be supposedly a informant, and he's selling bootleg DVDs of Disney movies. It's shit like that just just really takes you out of the moment as an adult. Now for kids, I was sitting, we were sitting in the theater and we were surrounded by families with children. All of the children seemed to enjoy it, and if that's who it was targeted at, fine, it worked. But it looked, not that I can't say better because sometimes kids movies are just for kids movies, and it's not that anything could be better or worse, but it looked better than that. It looked different and something quirky about it. It just had that feel about it, and it didn't work in that capacity. It seemed to just go for children and lowbrow and all of the things I've already talked about. So that was disappointing, but it's making money and seems to be making a lot of money. And so is Deadpool, by the way. And, me and Chris talked about Deadpool a while back, and god damn, it's making like tons of money. I think today it passed Guardians of the Galaxy at the box office, as far as of all time box office, and it's like, wow, that's just amazing that a rated R comic book movie is doing that well. This is also kind of a topic that I'm reluctant to get into talking about because I'm fans of both of these sets of people or people. And the only way I can preface this is by saying Kevin Smith versus Red Letter Media. And I'm going to preface that by saying that I am a fan of both of these people or sets of people. I've loved Kevin Smith since I was in high school. I think the first movie of his that I saw was Mallrats, and I went back and watched Clerks, and then saw Chasing Amy, Dogma, and everything he's done since then. I listen to all of his podcasts regularly. I watch his new YouTube show that he does. It's really great. And I'm also a fan of Red Letter Media. Like a lot of people, I came to Red Letter Media through the Plinkett reviews, the Star Wars Plinkett reviews. And then it eventually grew into, there's a group of people in Milwaukee that do filmmaking stuff, but they also make internet review shows and things like that. Like Half in the Bag, Best of the Worst, previously recorded. They also make movies like Space Cop, which I just recently got. And it's really, if you like schlocky movies made, modern day schlock movies made by no budget filmmakers, you should really check that out because it's really terrific in that capacity. And terrific Blu-ray release, by the way, which I may put up with the digital bits. I'm not quite sure yet. But I've been a fan of both of these people for a long time. But I find myself conflicted. And the reason I find myself conflicted is that lately, Red Letter Media has become a source of very negative comments towards a lot of movies and things that I've grown to generally like. Now, me personally, I try not to be too negative towards a movie unless I feel it really deserves it. Like I just got through talking about Zootopia, and I didn't talk about it wholly negatively, though, because I realized that there is a market for it, and it's doing well, and the people that it seems to be aimed at seem to be enjoying it, and that's fine. It's great, actually. I mean, if that's what it's for and it's doing its job, then great. But there is a kind of I wouldn't even call it a movement, but there seems to be this kind of thing with Red Letter Media where their cynicism overrides their validity, if that makes any sense. There's cynicism towards projects, of all kinds, movies and TV shows and things like that. Sometimes it gets a little too negative to the point where you're like, not that you're like, you don't like anything, but it's like, can't you say something a little bit more positive about this? And they do. And I think that the person who's most guilty of this is the head of Red Letter Media, Mike Stacklasa. I think he's he's one of the most negative people at that company, but at the same time, he's really funny. And he has some valid opinions about things. He's actually really smart. The Plinkett reviews were not popular for no reason. They were actually really incisive as well as being funny, and they had good points. And they really started a surgence of a movement against the George Lucas produced Star Wars prequels. Even to the dismay of some really hardcore Star Wars fans. And maybe I just didn't recognize it. Maybe I'm just now coming around to the fact that I'm recognizing this hardcore cynicism. For the record, I don't like the Star Wars prequels. I haven't watched them in a decade, maybe. Well, maybe I've seen them sooner than that, but I haven't watched them in a long time because they're so bad and they're difficult to get through. They have little moments, tiny moments of greatness, but there's not enough of it. That's why the Force Awakens was so refreshing, because it got you back in the mindset of what a Star Wars movie was and could be, with strong characters and strong storytelling and great visual storytelling that also felt grounded as opposed to, full of CGI mess and whatever your opinions are about it being, too similar to previous Star Wars movies. That's an invalid argument, and maybe I'll get into that at some point. But yeah, they really carved themselves a niche out in the internet, and I still watch their stuff, but I find myself conflicted at times because I go over to Kevin Smith, who a lot of people, there's a strong dislike for him that I don't quite understand. I love Kevin Smith. I've always loved him. I've at times been at odds with him too, where I've disagreed with him, but not to the point of I don't like this guy. He just has some opinions that I happen to disagree with, and you know what? Tough shit. That's the way life is. Sometimes you don't agree with people, you know, even people that you like. You don't always agree. And that's just the way it is. But you've got to look past that. If you really truly like these people, you got to look past the things that you don't agree with and find some common ground somewhere to where you're not totally at odds with each other and that you can be friends or whatever. I'm not friends with Kevin Smith or anything, but I think you understand what I mean. I hope you do. But Kevin Smith is so upbeat and positive about everything, really. Movies, comic books, fellow filmmakers and fellow writers. And, you know, he is so supportive of the industry and the people that work in it that when you switch over to Red Letter Media and you see how cynical they are being about everything, you find yourself at odds with them. And like I said, I think they're very talented folks, and I like them a lot. And I'm not saying that they should just be kiss asses or anything like that. And I don't think Kevin Smith's kiss ass. I think he just likes his industry, and he likes movies, and he likes, you know, comic books and everything else. And I think he just wants, he's like a lot of us. He's just a consumer. He's like, more, please, more of this stuff. Especially when it comes to the Marvel and the DC movies and TV shows and stuff. It's like, you know, he's gone into great amounts of detail in various podcasts and shows and stuff, and about, you know, we're living in an age when this stuff exists. When, you know, like 20, 30 years ago, this stuff didn't exist. And if you got a Marvel movie, it would be a really shitty one, you know, that was not faithful to the source material. So, yeah, I find myself at odds sometimes. I think sometimes Red Letter Media's, the way that they conduct themselves, especially on Half in the Bag, it feels a bit like a snake eating its own tail, where they're pointing out the negative things so much that it's almost like they are the negative thing. You know, it's hard to explain. I'm having a hard time explaining this. It doesn't feel as positive and supportive as Kevin Smith stuff. And not that things need to be compared and contrasted to each other, but I'm just saying that these are the two shows on YouTube and, you know, elsewhere that I watch the most and get the most entertainment value out of. So, you know, you start to see things in a different way once you start, you know, I think after you've watched things for a long time, I think you begin to become critical. You know, I'll watch everything that Red Letter Media does. I'll watch everything that Kevin Smith does, but I will have opinions sometimes. And, you know, they can continue to do what they do on both sides of the equation, but I find myself being more supportive and more into what Kevin Smith is doing because he's so positive. He turns me on to things that I might not be turned on to otherwise. And he gets me in the mind space of looking at things positively. And that's a big deal for me because I try to be a positive person and look at things in a more positive way. Even if I don't like something, I try to find some good in it. And so watching Kevin Smith and seeing how supportive he is of things, it's right up my alley. It's exactly how I would carry myself in that way. You know, he's just really in love with the medium or mediums, movies and comic books. You know, he loves music too, but that's not really a topic that he really gets into all that much. Yes, he says a lot of dirty things and, you know, whatever. I personally don't take offense to any of that stuff. I find him to be a very sweet man. He comes across that way. He comes across very endearing, like a friend that you would want to hang out with. That's just the way he comes across to me. He may come across differently to other people. But that's how I feel about that. I just wish Red Letter Media would stop being so damn negative about things sometimes. And I know they have valid opinions and they want to express their opinions, but sometimes it feels a little too negative to the point where you're like, and also sometimes that their jokes just, their jokes and the way they carry themselves, it feels like a snake eating its own tail sometimes. But those are just my opinions, and I'm going to move on. I'm currently watching Daredevil season 2. It's fucking fantastic. I love what they're doing. I love the new Punisher that they're doing. And I love that they're setting up a possible love triangle, maybe, or a relationship aspect with the lady secretary. I can't remember her name for some reason. I can remember everyone's name on that show but her. I don't know why. I know you're probably sitting there screaming it at me. I'm sorry. I don't remember. Anyways, I think she's starting to feel something for Matt. And there's possibly going to be an interlude between the two of them. I don't know. But I am really fucking excited because right now, I mean, Marvel stuff at the movies is great, but they're fucking killing it on Netflix. Their stuff on Netflix is amazing. And it goes beyond comic book shows. They're just really good fucking shows. Whether they're comic book related or not, they're just really gritty, really well told stories and shows. They're nailing it. The Jessica Jones it was a harder sit through because it felt really uncomfortable because of rape and everything, but it was equally good. But I find myself being more thoroughly entertained by Daredevil, and that's not to say that Jessica Jones has no entertainment value. It's just a different beast. And also, I'm really looking forward to the upcoming Luke Cage spinoff. And also, eventually Iron Fist and the Defenders. None of this stuff I've ever cared about, ever. Really. I mean, I've gone on record as saying I'm not a huge comic book fan. But these shows are so good that you don't need to be a huge comic book fan to enjoy them. You just need to like good quality shit. You know what I mean? Check out Daredevil season 2. It's awesome. And of course season 1 and Jessica Jones, and I think Luke Cage is set to premiere in September, if I remember right. So check those out. Terrific shows if you haven't yet. The Ghostbusters reboot that they're doing, I have absolutely nothing against it personally, because in my opinion, the original Ghostbuster movie and its sequel, even though it's not that good, they're always going to be there, regardless of these new movies. It's the same argument I have when people say, "Well, they adapted this book and it's really terrible. I don't like it." Well, the book is always there. Does it matter that they made a shitty movie out of a book? Does that enter into it? It doesn't enter into it because it doesn't matter, because that book is always going to be there and the original Ghostbusters is always going to be there, just regardless of how good or not good the new movie is going to be. Personally, I don't think this movie looks very good. Judging by the trailer, the jokes in the trailer were completely flat, reused, recycled jokes from lots of different movies. And it may satisfy people maybe that haven't been exposed to those jokes over and over again, but some of us who are in our 30s, 40s, and 50s and up have seen these jokes all their lives in movies. And, we don't need new reiterations from them. We just need, what this movie really needs is a good, solid story with solid characters. The special effects can be corny and cartoony. They should be, because, after they kind of were in Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. More so Ghostbusters 2 than Ghostbusters 1, because Ghostbusters 1 had some practical ghost effects and stuff that were really terrific. But at the same time, there was some cartoony stuff. I'm thinking specifically of the librarian and the dream that Ray has with the cocksucking ghost. Stuff like that. So that's fine. And that stuff in that trailer, that stuff looked great. And, I was like, oh, but that doesn't make or break the movie for me. First of all, it's a comedy. It's got to be funny. And I didn't find any of the jokes funny. I just found them recycled jokes, retread. So that didn't do it for me. And also, I didn't think that the characters were all that well defined in the trailer. The only person who seemed to have some real personality was Kate McKinnon. She comes across as the crazy nerdy scientist, which I think is what her role is going to be in this movie. The other three ladies, I don't really know. I don't know what their roles are, as far as personality goes. I have no idea. So I guess we just have to wait and see. I'm not going to make any real judgments until I see a final product. And by the way, I don't believe that I will be going to the theaters to see this because I don't think I can support it. Not because I'm anti Lady Ghostbusters. And by the way, that has nothing to fucking do with it for me. There is a section of the internet that is just hardcore. Well, there's two sides to that equation. Hardcore. There are hardcore people who are like, fuck these Lady Ghostbusters. I don't want vaginas in my Ghostbusters. That kind of thing. Just being real misogynistic and shit. And then there's a section of the internet that attacks those people and attacks everyone who says anything bad about this Ghostbusters reboot, and they just assume that everybody's being misogynistic about it. I'm not being misogynistic about it. I think these women have the potential to be funny, especially Kate McKinnon, who I think she's incredible on SNL. I think she's really great. She's probably the best and the funniest person on SNL. As far as like a current cast member, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're women. It could be all dudes, and I would still feel the same way. If it was all dudes saying the same jokes, I still wouldn't find it funny. It's got to be funny, no matter who is telling the jokes. The jokes have got to be funny. But I don't know. We'll see. Like, the effects look good in the trailer. But no real strong characters. Unfunny comedy. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see about that one, because that one's really up in the air. It angered a lot of people. And I didn't feel angry as much as I did. We'll see. Got to see the final movie. And I won't, and getting back to my point about not going to the movie to see it, it doesn't look good to me, so I won't go see it. I won't go support it. It doesn't look like a movie I would enjoy. So I won't go support it, but I'll probably rent it when it comes out on video to give it a chance to check it out. But I'm not gonna go pay money to go to the movie theater and watch something. And by the way, if you're doing that, if you don't want to see this movie and you go pay money to see this movie, you're supporting it. So you're fighting yourself, essentially. The snake eating its own tail thing aptly applies in this situation. Just don't go see it. That's how these things don't get made, or how they let them die off. The RoboCop remake, the Total Recall remake, the Point Break remake. None of these movies made money because nobody went to see them. And you know what? They didn't try to make sequels or do it again, because they realized, we need to leave this stuff alone. If you don't want to go see Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters, then don't fucking go see it. Don't pay money and let the studio, because the money, that's all the studio looks at, is money. If these movies make money, they'll make more of them. So if you go out and support them, you're fighting yourself. So anyways, you do what you want. But I'm just saying, if you're not in support of this and then you go out and support it, guess what? You just fucked yourself of it, essentially. Okay. You know what really bothers me about The Force Awakens? Not that the movie bothers me, but I'm talking about the people who talk about the movie. The people that say it's horrible and that the prequels are better, those people are retarded. I'm sorry. I know that's not a word that anybody likes. I don't really care. Those people have something mentally wrong with them, because they're no way, shape, or form do those movies have anything, the prequels have anything to do with the new sequels, other than, the fact that they both say Star Wars at the head of them. But the terms remake, reboot, and soft reboot, especially the last one, I have a real problem with when it comes to The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is a sequel. It is not a reboot. It is not a remake. It is not a soft reboot. I don't fucking understand what soft reboot means. Like, what do you mean soft reboot? Like, we're gently starting over? Because to me, rebooting means we're starting over, which means it would be Star Wars Episode 1. If it was rebooting, it would be starting from scratch. It wouldn't say Episode 7 in the title. That term makes no fucking sense to me. I don't understand it, and it seems to only be, the only time I've heard it applied is to Star Wars. That's what everybody called it when it came along. Same with the term Mary Sue. Didn't exist until Star Wars came along. And it's not a remake. This is what kills me about this. The Hateful Eight came along, and everybody started making comparisons to The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. They noticed similarities. They noticed it was about, both movies are about a bunch of people trapped in the middle of nowhere in the snow. At least one of them is a traitor, and they don't know who it is. And eventually, it all comes out who it eventually is, and everybody dies one by one. But nobody accused the Hateful Eight of being like a soft reboot of The Thing or something like that. Because if that's what you mean by soft reboot, then that term would apply in this case. But nobody said that. Everybody just said, oh, it's very much like The Thing. Nobody said, oh, he's just fucking ripping off The Thing. It's only because it's Star Wars. If it wasn't Star Wars, if it was something else, the reaction would have been different, I think. I don't think soft reboot would have even come up. People don't seem to get the concept of familiar storytelling. They don't seem to get that. Yes, there are things that are similar, but it's by design. And I think for the character's ultimate purpose, I think it's entirely by design. I think they already have this story mapped out as far as where it's going. And, spoilers, I think that Luke is her father. She's going through a journey, but it's also familiarity that will eventually lead somewhere, and it's there for a reason. And when episodes 8 and 9 come out, and all the movies are out, you can watch them back to back, and you go, oh, they did that on purpose. Yes, they did it on purpose. It was for a reason. But it's not remaking or softly rebooting or whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's simply just to get some familiarity. That's the only reason it's there. It's to refamiliarize yourself with Star Wars in a more grounded reality, in a way that you could follow the story. What if they had done it differently? Let's say they had done it differently, and they didn't start things out on a desert planet, and they started out in maybe like a forest planet. And they didn't follow the same sort of path that they did story-wise. And they did a different kind of story. Would it have been as accessible? No. It needs to be familiar in order to get back into a Star Wars mind space. The prequels had no familiarity other than through characters. Oh, there's C-3PO. Oh, there's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, there's Yoda. That's all that the prequels had was familiarity through characters. The Force Awakens has familiarity through story and design and concepts, and not just characters. Yes, the characters, Leia and Han and Luke being back. It's great, but it's not it's not the reason for the story. They're just a part of the story. They're not part of the overall arcing story. They're just a small part of it. You know, they're not the main focus like they were in the prequel, like characters like that were in the prequels. So familiarity was part of the movie's key success. If there had been no familiarity, you wouldn't have been able to gravitate towards the movie hardly at all. You would have just seen characters that you recognize, and it wouldn't have felt as grounded as it did. So the terms remake and reboot and soft reboot being tossed around about Star Wars, they don't apply. And soft reboot means nothing anyway, so stop using that term altogether. Yeah, that movie was great. So, I'm sorry to tell you this, but that was a well-made fucking movie. It was really well done. So well made, in fact, that I went and saw it an additional 6 times after seeing it once. And not because I'm a hardcore Star Wars fan. I just loved that movie. It was so good. And it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Or not what it's supposed to be, but what it should be. To be an effective movie. And that's exactly what it was. And you can argue and nitpick little tiny details about it, but I won't bother. Because it's not necessary. Because there's so much good that anything negative just doesn't really apply. It's like, I don't know, it's like going to a restaurant, getting really good service, getting a really good meal, and you realize that your fork is dirty before the meal. You can get another fork. It's not a big deal. The meal was really good. The service was really good. The price was really good. And that's all that really matters, It's, to me, it's that. It's finding, trying to find little bitty negative things to say about a movie that and say that the whole movie is bad because of this one small thing. That's horse shit. Star Wars Force Awakens is a terrific movie, and I can't wait for it. I've already got the Blu-ray pre-ordered, and I'm going to watch it the day I get it. So anyways, moving on. This is just a side note, but I mean, you know what I miss? My childhood. I guess that goes without saying. I miss stuff about my childhood, like all the toys and the movies and the cartoons and everything. I think, we all miss stuff like that, and we try to revisit it. I don't have my toys from my childhood anymore. My mother actually got rid of them, and I still hold a bit of a grudge about that. I know why she did it at the time, but, she did it just because she needed the money, and I wasn't playing with them anymore, but still. It still bothers me that she just sold them to somebody, because it was not only did she sell them, but she sold them to these people that lived next door. And where we lived was like below a highway. Like the highway was up top and we were down in sort of a little valley. And she sold them to somebody that lived behind us. And in front of their house was like a little drainage ditch that ran from the top of the hill on down. And when I found out that she sold my stuff, I went next door, and they weren't home, and we used to play over by the drainage ditch, like kids would do. And I found my toys laying everywhere in pieces, like just everywhere. Not taken care of, not looked after well. They were just scattered all over the place, caked in dirt, and some broken and changed and all that stuff. And it was really disappointing. But I mean, I got over it. You get over things like that, but I still hold a little bit of a grudge. But I miss stuff like that. And I don't really know how I don't keep up with it. I don't have kids, so I don't know if kids today really appreciate toys the way that a lot of us did when we were kids, because they've got more options now. They got tons of video games, home consoles, as opposed to mostly arcade games when we were kids, and maybe Nintendo and Atari. But it's funny just thinking about stuff like that, like just the idea of having toys and stuff, and it was a really big deal. I don't think that's so much true anymore. But I was thinking about childhood movies that I loved, and two of my, well, I have a couple actually. Flight of the Navigator, which I don't know if anybody listening has seen that. I'm sure somebody has. It's a Disney movie, and it was really wonderful. It was kind of magical, and it doesn't hold up very well today, but I still love it for nostalgic reasons. It's a terrific movie, and that's one that I've seen come to Blu-ray, but I wish it had a more elaborate Blu-ray release. I know it probably won't ever get one because nobody cares that much, but I loved it when I was a kid. Also, The Monster Squad, which you think about that movie if you know about it, and you think you watched that when you were a kid. Yeah, I did actually. It was part of what introduced me to monsters and stuff like that. I remember when I was a kid. This is a little embarrassing. When I was a kid, I was scared to death of the Michael Jackson Thriller video. When I was really young, when I was like 4. I remember my dad, who was partly responsible for me being a movie buff now. We didn't have like traditional cable. We had like a large satellite dish. Not really traditional television either. We had a large satellite dish that he would pick up things from, and for some reason, like the stuff that maybe it was a legal hookup. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. But he would pick up stuff that didn't have the commercials on them. So he was picking up signals that before they had put commercials. Like I remember watching Thundercats when I was a kid, and there were no commercials. It was just black for 2 or 3 minutes or however long it took to get back from a commercial. As a consequence, the best way to see stuff was to rent, and my dad had VCRs, a couple of them, and he would go to the video store, take me with him. He would pick out stuff, rent stuff, bring it home, record everything, go back to the video store, rent a bunch more stuff, record it. He recorded everything. As a consequence, I got to see tons of cartoons when I was a kid, and not just necessarily stuff that boys would watch. I would watch He-Man, Thundercats, Zoroark. I wasn't that big into G.I. Joe or Transformers, I was also big into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I got to see everything. I also got to see weird stuff that you never heard of, like the Bluffers. I just saw everything. I also watched a lot of girl stuff. I watched She-Ra, for obvious reasons that was related to He-Man, but I also watched My Little Pony, Strawberry Shortcake, Rainbow Bright, and then I would also watch stuff that everybody was watching, like Pound Puppies and Popples, and I saw everything when I was a kid. Didn't love all of it, but I saw it all just because Dad recorded everything, so it gave me a wide range of stuff to appreciate and see. And my toys reflected. I had all the Ghostbusters toys. I had all of the He-Man toys. I had some of the Thundercats and Silverhawks toys, and lots of other things. I remember when Gremlins, before I actually saw Gremlins, I had a little toy plastic Mogwai doll, and I also had a 6-record set that was a storybook version of the movie, which is very bizarre. I think about stuff like that, like movies that were a little more harder edged, and they would try to market them to children in some way, like with toys and things like that. It was a very strange time in the 80s for stuff like that. But anyways, I remember it was a 6-record set, and it was one of those things that, in retrospect, it was probably the first time that I recognized that there was stuff on that record that wasn't in the movie. And it was because, I say it now, they based their storybook off of the shooting script, which had all of the stuff that got cut out of the movie too. So it told a bigger story. And eventually, when the movie got released on DVD, a lot of that deleted stuff was there. So, and And it's one of those things that I think back that, like, oh, some of this was cut out of the movie, and it's one of the first times in my life, and I was really young. I was probably 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that when I noticed that. So it's one of the things that got me thinking about filmmaking and how they cut stuff out of movies. I didn't quite understand why they cut it out, but I knew that it wasn't in the movie, that they took it out, for whatever reason. But stuff like that, I remember when I was a kid. I don't really have a point to this. I just thought I'd talk about it. Masters of the Universe, the movie that they made. Call me crazy. I think that movie holds up a lot better than a lot of people seem to give it credit for. It's not a particularly great movie. But it's very entertaining and has a pretty good pace to it and a decent outcome. And when I was a kid, I was just happy to see He-Man anything on the screen. So I was happy when that came out. And I didn't see it as a bad movie or anything like that. It wasn't until years later that everybody's like, oh, that's reportedly one of the biggest bad movies ever made. And I'm like, how? I don't understand. This movie had high production value and it makes sense. I've seen way worse movies than Masters of the Universe, and I don't even think Masters of the Universe is really that bad. I think it has a lot of ideas that aren't very good, but it doesn't warrant the kind of critique that it gets about being a bad movie. I just think it's, they didn't have tons of budget to make a world like, the world of Masters of the Universe is set in Eternia. And they only had a few shots of Eternia. They didn't have tons of budget to make a huge Eternia, but they tried. And I was actually glad that they dropped Prince Adam from it. I wish they'd had Cringer in some capacity, like Battle Cat. And maybe Orko, but I mean that stuff was kiddie stuff, and they weren't going for that. They were trying to make it a little more movie friendly, and I'm fine with that. So I never understood why that movie was so written off the way it was. I guess it was the times. I don't know, but even in retrospect, still people talk about it like, oh, it's one of the worst movies ever made. I disagree wholeheartedly. There are way worse movies than that. The Room hardly makes any sense at all, but it does have some semblance of a story that kind of has an outcome. Masters of the Universe is a better movie than The Room. Take that and do with it what you will. That's actually a fairly good movie compared to most. And I guess that's all I've got to talk about this week. I know I'm talking about random things, but that's really all that I came here to do today, was just talk about random things. I don't know. I might do this in the future. I may start doing these solo one-offs and just rambling. Hopefully by the next time I come back, which I don't know when that'll be, I'll have some more stuff to talk about. It just seemed like I had a whole lot of stuff. Some of it important, some of it not so much to talk about. So until next time, this has been Tim Salmons from the Digital Bits. I guess I'll be back here soon. I'm not sure how soon. Like I said, I can't promise anything because I don't know what the future holds. Until then, take care.